Ladies and gentlemen, hello again and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. Joining me on today's show is Brian Halverson. This is our Sunday weekend review news show. I think kind of the format I want to at least toy around with here for a little bit is doing one show in the middle of the week that's more focused in on a topic, or maybe doing interviews or that sort of thing. And at the end of every week, because Sunday is like news of the weekday, that's the way this whole thing is rhythmed out. We can take a look at stuff that's happening in the U.S. and around the world. So this is going to be the first voyage of this new format. Are you excited, Brian?
I am excited, and with that excitement, as of day one of this format.
Yeah, you're like the first mate on the good ship news of the week.
Well, we're doing this in the middle of the day, and I want to point out how in the past you may have, if you've been listening to the show for any number of episodes, most of the time I've been doing episodes with Chris in the evening. And that's just because I have times generally early in the morning or late in the evening. And I know I just generally know Chris is not in a very early in the morning. I mean, like 4 a.m. early.
Oh, yeah. No. Especially that's when I'm like dead in the middle of sleeping at that point.
So there you go. So that's out. But whenever I'm late in the evening, I've normally been up since 4 a.m. and my energy is unpredictable, or maybe predictably downward.
He's concerned about the Jeb Bush low energy memes that you people in the audience have been putting out.
Yeah.
Him.
I'm very concerned.
Yeah, no, he's seen the electoral college map of low energy Brian going, and it's gotten to him. And now on the good ship news of the week, we set sail in the middle of the day. Ahoy. Uh-oh.
I got you now.
All right, and we're back. Okay.
I left you with a good ship.
Yeah. I also stopped. I just kind of went into pause mode because I thought this thing was going to crash out. The raw video feed people are already getting their raw points. They're getting their raw dog bucks, whatever we want to call them. I don't think
this is good. This is good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
So. Good. Yeah, das is good. Let's pop up the slate here onto the screen for everybody.
Thank you.
Cool. So yeah, you've got a link to it too, but I've got the slate up for everybody. First things first, what we want to talk about a little bit here is Joe Manchin and Jim Justice. I don't have like a lot of copy on this. I'll just set it up this week. An interesting development in the Joe Manchin dynamic has begun to appear. And there have been inklings of this last year between Jim Justice and Joe Manchin. Jim Justice have been pushing for increased stimulus checks, but the dynamic of the Senate was different enough at the time that it was a thing to be aware of, but also not a thing to be particularly concerned about, because Joe Manchin's power, his stock value, if you will, was yes, he was always going to be a centrist-y, annoying Democrat on that front. However, he was not going to be. Hey, give me Brian. Let's just reset. I'm clipping a little bit, and I want to start.
Check.
Yeah, I'm clipping, so I'm gonna.
Okay.
What I'll do is actually I'll just keep the video rolling here. I'm just gonna reopen.
Okay.
Let me delete this. Delete. Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. This is episode 505 on our march to 1,000.
Whoa!
Yeah, the journey of 1,000 podcasts is with but a single step. And
Oh, 1,000. My God.
I know how horrible is
Why did you say that?
why wouldn't I say that? So, anyways, on today's show, joining me here is Brian Halverson. We are toying around with a bit of a new format. I've been trying to get shows out to y'all in a bi-weekly rhythm, and as bi-weekly being defined here not as every other week, but being defined as twice in a week. It's one of those weird words with fungible definitions. But in this case, trying to get out 2 shows a week here, and I think kind of the format I wanted to play around with, because I've got the time to do it, I've got the rhythm to do it now, is we'll have a targeted episode in the middle of the week, something talking about a specific subject. Maybe I look into a bit of world news or something like that, have a guest on. If we're doing an entire episode on Joe Manchin, happen in the middle of the week. On the weekend show, we'll do a surfing of the news headlines. So we're going to look at everything the Biden administration is doing domestically here, or take a good swath over that stuff. And then also, because I'm really interested in world affairs, to be honest, and like where America fits in on the world affairs side, take a look at some of world affairs, global trends, and see what we can see on that front. So joining me on the good ship news of the week, it's a boat, Brian. It's a fucking boat. Is Brian Halverson. How's it going? You're the first mate. You're like the skipper.
So I have obligations that.
Yeah.
What do I got to do?
Well, you got to be high energy. Can you be high energy?
Well, I can be higher energy because this is in the middle of the day, and I will. I will acknowledge whether or not my acknowledgement was needed. That whenever Chris and I record later in the evening, my energy it goes down.
No, it's
at some point, and I think these Sunday shows, or at some point in some sort of recap show that is not at the end of my day, and my day usually begins around 4 a.m. And Chris and I have always had, like, I've always thought that if we were a part of like a security guard firm, that you would be a great PM security guard, and I would be the AM.
Yeah, we can totally overlap it with like that 6 hour or like that 4 hour overlap, and yeah.
But I am a very early riser in nature, and if Chris was up at 4 a.m. to record,
it would be because I had been up all the way through.
Right.
So it'd be like at the absolute end of my day. Man, I'm trying to be better about that now that I work from home. Also, when you get into the winter months, because of the stupidity of daylight savings time, I find that if I don't wake up earlier, I get really fucking depressed because I never see the sun.
Right.
And I'm pretty effective during the night. Like I, as you said, I'm a night guy, but I need like several hours of daylight too to have like my late night creativity burst. Like I can't just wake up in the night and be like, cool, let's be creative now. Like that absence of sun, it does make a big difference. I try to be better about that.
Yeah. I used to have a different work schedule where I could get like a 2 to 3 hour chunk of sleep in and then be good for like till 12, 1, maybe 2 a.m. But those days are over. And
no, it's different.
I miss it.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. The people, ask me about getting married and those sorts of things, and I often bring up the best part about being single is naps. You can take naps whenever you want. Like if you go, well, I got nothing to do right now, I'm gonna just lay down here and fall asleep for the next several hours.
And Chris and I probably aren't going to get into too much investment talk, but the value of the nap only goes up. Okay. Okay. Can we end it? Should we end it with that?
Yeah, no, that's good. I will just say before we move into the actual show, I've had a number of good questions this week about investments, kind of getting started. I've been trying to help people out. Actually, Brian was one of the people who asked me questions too, but I've had a number of y'all get at me. Please keep them coming. Like you are not. No one is inundating me or overwhelming me. If anything, I feel like I tend to just go like, all right, well, I'm gonna just kind of riff on this for 10 minutes now, and you just absorb what you can on this, because I don't have like formalized material on it. I can just rattle off the top of my head. But there's not a lot to talk about with AMC or GameStop at this point, other than there will be congressional hearings. Those will be interesting. I think my comment to you is that I think this Vlad guy, the CEO of Robinhood, is going to get the Martin Shkreli treatment when he goes and testifies before. You already got a taste of that when he did the appearance with Chris Cuomo. He's going to need to have a hell of a much more compelling answer for some of these questions. Again, particularly around restricting purchasing of stocks like Moderna. And
does he have a best answer or an evolving answer?
Yeah, they do. I don't want to get too. Basically, okay. They're claiming. I'll answer the question. They're claiming that they failed to meet capital requirements. And where this starts to get murky is the capital requirements are not like government regulatory capital requirements. They are from a regulatory firm, yes, but it's kind of like how the Better Business Bureau is not actually part of the government. It's actually, and so then the question is like, who made the company change? And yeah, there's a lot of weird questions, and it looks like a laundering of accountability to get Robinhood to do this. And I'm guessing Melvin and Citadel Capital will have some questions to answer. And the sticky wicket's going to be: is there a paper trail?
Well, what's interesting is that it's probably due to how untethered they wanted to be from regulations that Robinhood is so difficult to regulate. And if they had any sort of honest, neutral regulations before this began, like the immediate reaction they could have given would probably be a lot heavier than it is right now. But because they've gamed the system, to a degree, they game the system, but they also game the system for people who can game the system against them.
One thing, this is we're on the topic. I've been giving some thought about, like, people are like, what do you want to see change, Chris? One thing that has not changed since the financial crisis from our college years is this issue of capital requirements. And a lot of these investment firms do not have the cash on hand to cover. And I'm not necessarily saying they need to have all the cash on hand, but I think the capital requirements right now are too low. And one thing that does need to change, and the market is healthy enough to absorb this, so it's a perfect time to do it, is the capital requirements. Use GameStop, use AMC as auspices to require that all of these hedge funds have more cash on hand to cover, especially if they're going to play shorts. Because shorts can wipe your ass out. Even with the GameStop stock deflating a little in price right now, there's still a lot of shorts that are going to get really pinched by that gap. Ditto with AMC.
And that's how the center throws their weight around here, I suppose.
Well, yes. I mean, what I was talking about with Matt Lewis in the last show. I can build on that. So what I was talking about with Matt Lewis in the last show is that the problem, I have many problems with centrism. But if you're asking me beyond my ideological problems with them, why do I think they fail tactically? It's because they fail to speak to where the public is at generally. Centrism, as we understand it in America, is super elitist. And a populist centrism is something that's been pretty fucking absent from politics. Joe Manchin, who we're going to get into next here, is not a populist centrist. I don't care how many folksy couplets he rattles off here. He's not a man of the people. His daughter's in Big Pharma. And neither is Susan Collins. Susan Collins is a scoldy elitist who I still remember her telling us, how bad we were for saying such mean things about Brett Kavanaugh Like uh, Susan Collins is not a person of the people. She's someone who thinks she knows way better than all of us. So you have an elitist centrism beyond just like the general dopiness of splitting the difference in everything else. The centrism we have is very much typified by that. So I mean, I think that it kind of accounts for part of the problem here too. Just speaking of that though, Joe Manchin, Jim Justice. This week, an interesting development happened in the Joe Manchin dynamic that I wanted to highlight here.
My goodness.
So there have been murmurs that justice was available on the stimulus check stuff. However, all the stuff from last year, to caveat on it, doesn't have the same relevance in the year 2020 as it does now because of the Georgia special elections and because the dynamics of the Senate are 50-50 and because in that 50-50 dynamic now, Mitt Romney would be another very Patrician-y centrist. You now have Patrician-y centrists trying to really drive the car here, and Joe Manchin is really, really, really throwing his weight around on this stuff. Jim Justice, for those of you who don't necessarily know who Jim Justice is, no, he's not a professional wrestler. He looks far from someone who spends a lot of time at the gym, actually. But he was a Democrat at one point, but he was a West Virginia Democrat who flipped to being a Republican during the middle of the Trump administration. He did a number of appearances with Donald Trump and was like, my party has lost its way, that whole speech. And he's one of the many reasons for those who are like, why does Chris always think that Joe Manchin is going to stab the Democratic Party in the back? Well, the governor, who is a Democrat, did it. So, like, it's a credible threat. I think, like, when you take Joe Manchin's voting record, which is about 60-40 right now, not great. And among the centrists, it's really, really weak. And then you also look at what Jim Justice is doing. There's a lot of reasons to think that Joe Manchin might go and become a Republican at some point. What were you going to say?
No, it's everything that has been brewing with this. It feels like this is something more personal than we will ever understand. This feels petty.
I mean, this is what state politics is. You have these long-standing beefs and grievances, and in the case of West Virginia, not unlike a couple episodes ago when I was talking about Delaware, this is small state politics dynamics. And this is one of the weird distortions of the Senate. It's like, yeah, Delaware has senators. Those senators represent about 1 million people and 1 million corporations, like quite literally. Same thing with West Virginia, minus the corporations. It's like, they have senators, but these senators could just as easily be mayors here in the state of Texas.
So if we were to look at the state legislature of West Virginia, does it matter how many of them align more with Manchin and how many of them align more with Justice?
I mean, like, what are we talking? When you say align, like, we're not talking about ideologically, because like, Manchin and Justice are basically the same creature.
Exactly. Like, I don't understand how like they can be so close but oppose one another, and the only reason it makes sense.
Okay, I can tell you that it's because they're fighting for the same slot. I mean, like, so like this is why I'm saying this is an amazing opportunity. For
right.
Is there's been a lot of talk about pressuring Joe Manchin from the left. And I certainly am someone, as a progressive, who is in favor of holding the Democratic Party to account when they betray democratic values or liberal values, progressive values, whatever the fuck you want to call them. I don't care. But in the case of Joe Manchin, I don't really think a left critique of Joe Manchin gets you anywhere in Virginia. But what I think gets you quite a distance and gets you into a very interesting position is burning the bridge that Joe Manchin keeps threatening to cross. Because Joe Manchin's entire leverage right now, and this is what makes Manchin different from Sinema. I like pressuring Sinema. And I've got more on that too. I can back that up with some more numbers in a second here. But Manchin's different. if you're looking at the Jim Justice example, if you're looking at the way the Republican Party has been becoming more strong in West Virginia, the dynamics of it, the fact that the Republican Party's been becoming more white. They've been selling this forgotten man narrative. If you could argue that the forgotten man narrative that they continue to flatter themselves with, it does not serve many purposes, but one of the key purposes it serves is the reddening of West Virginia. Embracing hillbilly elegy as a viable narrative, all that. Oh, coal country was betrayed. That's West Virginia, baby. So the Republicans have been putting a lot of pressure on West Virginia, and Joe Manchin has been threatening to leave the party. He's also been threatening to retire, but he's been threatening. Lots of threats. Joe Manchin likes the threats, and he uses the threats to get stuff. So what I think the Democrats need to do, just to finish the thought here, is they need to burn the bridge, and they need to use a Lincoln Project like super PAC dark money attack group. Not necessarily the Lincoln Project. They've got their own problems if you want to talk about those in a bit. But I think the Lincoln Project model is super useful, though. And I think deploying it on Joe Manchin here as like the conservative Republicans for West Virginia attacking Joe Manchin for not getting the stimulus checks. It's like, to bring it back, what's the rift between Manchin and Justice? Where's the flanking happening? Justice has been aggressively calling for these stimulus checks that enjoy 78% popular support, according to one poll I looked at for this show.
This is just specific to West Virginia?
No, this is a Quinnipiac poll. It says 78% of Americans support the $1,400 stimulus checks, including 90% of Democrats and 64% of Republicans.
Okay.
So I have to imagine in West Virginia, that's one. I the idea that they wouldn't be over 50% in West Virginia yet this strong everywhere else seems really far-fetched and like a statistical outlier. Two,
right.
Given the economics of West Virginia, you have to just assume.
So I guess what's strange here is Justice and his total outcome is serving the needs of West Virginia. But Manchin's power position allows him to devalue certain local needs in order to say that he is serving a cause that is national.
This is where burning the bridge really helps too. Is Manchin's entire claim to staying in the party, or like staying in the picture in Virginia politics or in West Virginia politics, is gonna be I'm gonna bring home the bacon guy.
Right,
and that's where his Patrician centrism is. I want to merge Patrician and Patricentrism. Yeah, I like that. Patricentrism. It's staying. It's got to stay. We gotta make it live. But don't pull a face. And we're on video now. You're pulling faces.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, okay.
I was thinking of Gene Wilder and Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, or
Frankenstein. Yeah. Great movie.
Make it live.
But yeah, the Patricentrism of Joe Manchin is not bringing home the bacon. And don't glare at me. I don't like your glares. You're glaring.
No.
you had bulgy eyes. I hate it. And I think here's the other thing. If Manchin goes any more to the right, and he's only a 50-50 vote anyways, he's not useless to the Democrats, but he's also not, you can let him walk. And I don't really see why the Republicans wouldn't reward Justice over Manchin, because Justice got in the door first. That's the other place where I think Manchin's calculus on this is wrong.
Right, and I feel like I don't understand Manchin's end game, because if Manchin does eventually want to be governor, exactly how long can you come out and say things like, well, West Virginia really is more of an $11 an hour place, not really a $15. Like, exactly how long can you undercut
That's another good one that you had to bring up. Yeah.
And still say that you're playing both angles.
Joe Manchin doesn't think that you're worth $15 an hour. Joe Manchin doesn't want you to get $2,000 stimulus checks. Does Joe Manchin really care about you and West Virginia? This ad paid for by the progressive or the conservative Republicans for West Virginia.
No, this ad was paid for by Joe Manchin just opening his mouth.
I know. No, I mean, these are fantastic. Having him talk about especially like the economic populist issues. And this gets back to what I'm saying. The Patrician centrism. Why is he vulnerable on this stuff? Because he's taking patricianist positions on all of these things.
So there's too much of Joe Manchin's positioning to tell me that he is actually positioning for the governor race, because it seems like he doesn't give a damn about his local optics.
No, I think he wants to stay as a senator. And I think so. Like, I think in Manchin's brain, he's trying to stay separate from Justice. Justice can stay governor, but Manchin will stay senator. I think the issue for Manchin is that Justice might want to be senator, and Justice is really opening up the inside lane to flank Joe Manchin. And like for those interested, like this is what a real flanking looks like.
So how can you? Justice, Democrat, turn Republican, Trump Republican, and now who supports?
The Democrats might even like having Justice in there because they might be able to buy his ass a second time.
Damn it! I barely had something together. Who supports? Who gets behind Justice flanking Manchin? When Manchin does so well to undercut any of the actual progressive agenda that's out there.
God, you know, the best thing would be is if there's a proxy war where the Republicans start putting money to back up Joe Manchin and the Democrats put money to back up Jim Justice.
That would be real. That would be real.
I can credibly make the it would be hilarious. I can credibly make the case for why rational actors might end up in this situation, but it's funny as shit.
Like whenever Venkman says "Don't cross the streams," like this is why. Because once you go there and then something legitimate comes out of it, it's over.
But like the whole fact that we end the segment there is once again illustrative of like why is this brand of centrism fail? It's because it's not like rooted in an ideology. It's there's
no end game.
No, it's just two craven men, nominally of different parties, but both temperamentally super craven, trying to angle to stay alive in politics as long as possible.
No, this is the 7 foot tall, rather sedentary person at the front of the volleyball net who was just waiting for the game to come to them. And you don't have to wait for long because things are always around the net. You know, you can be lazy as long as you're a giant power like that. You know, man.
All right, so to move us along here a little bit, a couple of stories that stuck out to me this week. One from the Washington Post here, another one is reported in numerous outlets, including the Washington Post, Bloomberg, CNN, and Axios. First, after the Trump administration relocated the Bureau of Land Management's headquarters to Colorado. Now, you might remember in the Obama years, the Bureau of Land Management had like a real scandal in terms of administration. It's not because of Obama, but like BLM was a real mess, not Black Lives Matter, the Bureau of Land Management. Trump and Bannon wanted to gut the administrative state and get rid of as many administrators as possible to put in nothing but like Trump loyalists, the same way they wanted to stack up the courts. So one of the ways they did that is they moved the headquarters of the Bureau of Land Management, in this case, to Colorado, which resulted in 87% of staffers either quitting or resigning. 287 employees left the job. 41 people moved to the new office in Colorado. about 95% of the more than 9,000 staffers were working outside of Washington before the relocation took place. So everyone's out there. People can't just easily uproot and go to Colorado. It's expensive to do that. Government jobs pay okay, but not that great. And yeah, this is just more of the ripple effects of Trump's gutting of the administrative state, an administrative state that we're now in the midst of a crisis and we could really use.
Yeah,
Any
and
thoughts on that?
this is one of those positions that you can just predict whenever you want to grow it back. You know what the counter is going to be. This is the traditional argument of the Democrats wanting to just create giant administrative states that are unwarranted. When Trump just took a hatchet to things.
Yeah, Trump, he took the Grover Norquist line of a government so small I could drown, or you could drown in a bathtub, and it's more like now a government so weak that it can't save you from drowning in a bathtub.
Yeah.
And to that point, more on the administrative state here that stuck out to me this week. The Department of Health and Human Services diverted millions of dollars in federal funds intended for vaccine research and public health emergencies to pay for unrelated salaries, administrative expenses, the removal of furniture, news subscriptions, and legal services. In 2018, an unidentified whistleblower alleged that the office to the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, so this is in 2018, in the Office of Preparedness and Response, our response has been great, though, so, it's not like this got in the way, had said that there had been a misusage of money that goes all the way back to 2010, and that Congress had allocated money for the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority that had been misused. A human health and human services inspector, boy, I'm getting my acronyms confused today, Inspector General report said that the agency couldn't account for more than $500 million from 2007 to 2016. And as recently as fiscal year 2019, more than 25 million was improperly taken. So I guess here's what's important. Some of this is Trump administration era, but another thing that's important here is, going back to what Brian said, just because a Democrat's in office does not mean that the administrative state is going to be staffed with the right type of people. And this is kind of Warren's critique of the Obama administration, and really good evidence that when she was critiquing the Obama administration, saying, like, you have the wrong people in here and people are policy, like, this is an example of what people as policy are. There is a real mismanagement. Yeah, the Obama administration's Health and Human Services Department was better than the Trump administration's, right?
Yeah,
but there's still clear problems here.
This is, I guess, kind of a Maslow argument, or kind of like, are you a warm body? Does your president allow you to exist? Okay, there you go. And then from there, like, are you serviceable, and how do you compare to your predecessor? Well, now we don't have a predecessor. And so it seems like there's a lot of knowledge and understanding that is based in these industries that you just know is just lost. It's just like a family that just has it's kind of like a death in the family, where you just have this piece that's removed from the family, and then everyone just has to move on. And then when there's new people in the family, the dynamics change. But I guess where I'm going with that is there's more to it than just there is a total benefit to there being a lineage, even if the lineage is argumentative and not in alignment with one another. There's at least some sort of comparison.
No, I'm with you. Like, this pejoratively is referred to as either the deep state or the blob at various points, but what you're talking about, like a semi-consistent administrative state, especially in less political realms, you know, Bureau of Land Management, I suppose, can be political when you have corporate interests that want to get access to certain land, that sort of thing. But for example, Health and Human Services, it's not generally that political of
Right,
of an administration bureau.
right.
And what you want in our system, I'm talking about a two-party system, but I would want this if there was a multi-party system too. I would want a third party to respect this. It would be important to me. Is this idea that in some of these agencies, it is they yes they exist within government, but they are largely not a political place, and that the people that we staff these agencies with and the decisions made in this agency are done really like the looking out for the country's best interests, as though the country was like a company that the bureau was in service of. And like it really shouldn't be any more complicated than that exercise. And it's like really frustrating to like watch agencies that, in my opinion, are just, they're not like, the Defense Department will always be political, right? But
Right.
I just don't think that the Works Progress Administration has to be, or the Health and Human Services Department has to be. I think there are a number of these agencies that they don't. Department of Energy, well, DOE, I gotta get the nuclear stuff, but like a lot of this stuff can be more neutral, and it's bad that you now have a situation where it's like, Daddy, in this case, the Republicans, just doesn't want to do it anymore. Like, doesn't want to participate in the family anymore. Doesn't want to go to any of the family functions anymore. And mom's answer to this is not necessarily always virtuous. Like, mom's better. Like, mom will still cook dinner and stuff for you, but mom's also like drunk and popping pills in the bathroom. Yeah.
Coping.
Yeah. The way the BLM, actually, the Bureau of Land Management's a perfect example of this, right? You have the Obama years where there's real corruption and real problems in the BLM.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have the Trump years where they're just like, okay, well, we're going to destroy it. Which is,
Yeah, yeah. And
that's
sometimes you
dangerous.
destroy, yeah, but destroying things for the wrong reasons, you
But
will
they're
always learn
replacing-
the lesson important in why you should have imploded.
I mean,
things.
here's the thing. Like, they're not saying that there even needs to be a Bureau of Land Management. They're just
Right.
like, well, Obama's Bureau of Land Management was bad, so we're going to destroy it. It's not a thing. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about MAGA Taylor Greene. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, the leader of the Republican Party, was on 3 committees. She was involved with steering. I forget if she was actually ever on steering, but she got voted. The House finally voted to remove her from 2 committee seats for embracing a number of conspiracy theories, everything from Jewish space lasers to QAnon to wearing. I don't see this mentioned enough, but I think it's important. She literally wore a mask on the House floor that said Trump won, and I guess you could argue tenuously, edgelord style, that she's talking about 2016. But I think we all know what that mask. Right? Yeah, I know. So the Democrats gave the Republicans an unbelievable offer here. They offered to McCarthy to only remove her from 1 committee. Yeah, and he got to pick it. And
He said, balked at it.
he balked at it. Yeah, he was like, nope, you had to vote on it, thinking that this was going to make the Democrats look bad. Like this, I'm more than happy, and I brought up on a number of occasions when the Democrats do something stupid tactically to point that out. In this case, I think the Democrats gave Kevin McCarthy like almost too generous of an offer, and McCarthy is an absolute fucking fool for not taking it. The only argument I can come up with for why he wouldn't have taken it is because McCarthy wants to depower Marjorie Taylor Greene, but in a way that launders out any, some would call it reward, but in the case of the dynamics of the Republican Party, it would only be accountability and punishment for going after
Okay,
Marjorie
yeah,
Taylor.
so maybe this is an indicator that McCarthy just doesn't know how to be the pivot in this and come out clean with whatever is going on with the Q base.
Oh, they don't know how to decouple. I saw. I don't
Yeah.
have this on the slate, but I saw another article this week. I think Cody might have sent it to me, where it's basically the reporting is essentially a three-way split inside the Republican caucus right now of the nice Republicans, we'll call them on this show, and then the floaters, the people who are like, well, I kind of agree with the nice Republicans, but also like I don't have any balls, and I'm kind of scared as shitless of the third group here, which is like Marjorie's caucus. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what Trump off the scene. You have to imagine when Trump gets back on the scene, that's gonna break whatever vertebrae is left in the fractured spine of the floating caucus.
Yeah, and whatever power is going to come out of Trump coming back, I think that fringe is going to benefit from them sort of galvanizing around a certain understanding of power. And then he comes back, and that's going to flip people. Man. I still think we were talking earlier. I am not certain how primarily to oppose her. I know that there is a proper way to oppose her, but just communications wise, they're obviously trying to play with her brand in a AOC sort of way. If you even just talk about her in not using the what is it, MTG, and they are trying their best. Honestly,
you don't know the genius of the MTG thing. Like you brought up the don't call her Marjorie Taylor Greene thing to me before we did the show. Now I'm thinking about we need to never call her MTG. I think that's where you're right, because the idea here is to make her like the Republican answer to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
I am sorry, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a serious fucking human being who sometimes misspeaks, is a little bit prone to hyperbole, but has on numerous occasions, like too many for me to like even rattle off here, but like just the appearance with Michael Cohen, for example, the hearing with Michael Cohen alone about all of the money laundering and the usage of real estate stuff. She has shown herself to be an adept elite level legislator with, again, the one downside of a penchant for hyperbole. Marjorie Taylor Greene, aka MTG, is a full-on conspiracy theory nut. Like,
it's all Kevin
she's a
McCarthy
9/11
gets out of her.
truther.
Yeah.
She's a 9/11 truther. And so, like, to your point, they're trying to go, oh, the phrase they want to get out of the Patrician Centrist mouth is AOC MTG. I don't like any of that. And that's the goal. Yep.
If McCarthy can do that, he has used Greene as a figure just perfectly.
Oh no, she's already served her purpose at that point. Yeah, I agree. I know it's gross.
And that feels like the end game. Like that would make sense for McCarthy to.
And you can imagine there are some people in Democratic leadership who are pretty okay with that as the end game too.
Oh yeah! Wow.
I don't. Does Kamala Harris really hate that as the end game?
That's so gross. Like, that's just as gross as why you and I still need Manchin to say that Bernie Sanders is a better budget committee rep than Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, I know.
We're still waiting, aren't we? Well, what day is it now?
Bro, I am still waiting for legislators and lawmakers to, in a concerted way, make it abundantly clear that during this election and in all future elections, there is no magic way to win the election on January 6th of the subsequent year. Brian, I need that one fucking said out loud still. Because we've walked away. It's now 1 month later, and we have shimmy-shammed away without ever saying definitively that there was absolutely zero way to win the election on January 6th. I know it's stupid.
We're both holding our breath here.
Yeah, you and I both know that it's not true, right? Right? But I need it said out loud. Real quickly, gotta do a shout out. Profiles of Courage here. You know when Profiles of Courage is coming up on. Don't worry about the government. We're making fun of somebody. Profiles of Courage here. You'll see on the screen 3 brave representatives from the House of Representatives this week. Representative Case from Hawaii, Representative Golden from Maine, and Representative Schrader from Oregon. These Democrats took the brave stand this week. What was the brave stand, you might be saying? The brave stand was to not embrace the rules to fine lawmakers up to $10,000 for bypassing security measures that were enacted after the January 6th storming of the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. Yet 3 Democrats voted against $10,000 fines for not going through metal detectors. Nancy Pelosi, like, in fairness to her, goes, it's beyond comprehension why any member would refuse to adhere to these simple common sense steps to keep this body safe. It is beyond comprehension why any Democratic lawmaker would not be whipped into submission to do this. And honestly, beyond comprehension that we'd even need to whip any of these Democratic lawmakers into doing this.
And I'm really exploring this right now.
It hurts your brain, right? Yeah. Like, when I looked at the names, it's like, maybe if I see the names, this will make more sense to me.
But please. No, it doesn't.
I gave the names. They're like no-namers.
Yeah,
and one's from Oregon,
yeah.
one's from Hawaii, and one's from Maine. These are like not, especially Oregon.
I can't think of any.
Like, there was a terrorist attack. They were trying to kill you. The Trump people want to kill Democrats. You're a Democrat. You think they're going to give a shit that you're like, well, actually, on the bill that was going to fine House members $10,000 if they didn't go through the medical detector, please stop beating me with the flag. Yeah, no. That's not going to happen. Oh, no, you're cracking my skull on the floor of the Capitol steps, but my votes were good. Yeah, no. They don't care.
I understand this.
Fucking morons. Like,
there's got to be something other.
That is literally my commentary on this. These fucking morons. I bet you there is a corruption story here. But, like, underpinning the corruption story is being so goddamn short-sighted that you don't realize that, like, you're not protected. The only thing that would maybe protect them is the Magic R, and the Magic R ain't necessarily going to protect you. Just go and ask Mike Pence. Speaking of Mike Pence, you know what he's doing? You know what his post-presidency game is? You're like this.
That's a good question.
He's going back to his roots. That's your hint. What does that mean?
People like Mike Pence don't have roots.
No, they certainly do. How dare you accuse him of being a rootless cosmopolitan? Okay. That is what libs do. They're the rootless cosmopolitans.
Okay, so people like Mike Pence know how to feign that they have roots. What roots is Mike Pence feigning?
Okay, he's going back. He's doing a radio show again. He's launching a fucking podcast, Brian. He's the competition now. You got to go and book him. You need to get him on the show.
Who wants to hear Mike Pence?
I do.
Just here. But no, but
and people love it when I have conversations with reasonable conservatives. So why wouldn't we want Mike Pence on?
Doesn't the value of Mike Pence need the image of Mike Pence and his like perfect hair and tan? Like, what is Mike Pence without the image?
My read on this is that Pence realizes that he does not have a path forward in the party. That he might be able to run as a senator again, but he's also not a leader. Like he's a total cipher. Like, yeah, he does have evangelical fundamentalist roots or whatever, but even on that point, looking at his vice presidency in a serious way, he was a total cipher. He was very able to sell out whatever espoused values he had in greater service of advancing the Trumpy narrative. There's the line that his wife said, at least maybe apocryphally, but like at least has been out there for a long time. Of I hope it was worth it, Mike, when he won the vice presidency. Remember that? Like you know,
No,
you don't remember that? Oh, okay. That was the night
no,
of the election. I think the story is something like he went in for a kiss and his wife kind of like pushed him away. I was like, I hope it was worth it, Mike. Like I think that she is actually a more devout, true believer type who really struggles with the relationship with Trump. And Mike Pence he's a cipher. He's a vessel. And yeah, he's a white evangelical Christian brand, but like as a guy, he's less than that. But I don't think he has a path forward because part of what being a Republican is now, it's not about draping yourself in the religion is so much less essential than it was 5 years ago. And I don't think it helps you as much. Like, you can't obviously be a heretic. Although Trump held the fucking Bible upside down, like this year or last year, like within the last calendar year. It probably did it hurt him at the ballot box? He picked up voters. Literally holding the Bible upside down. Being a Christian has never mattered less in the Republican Party. And in terms of, yeah, you got to say it, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to be it. You don't have to live it. You don't have to govern like it. And I think that was Pence's strongest asset. Outside of that, outside of being able to be a hashtag true believer on that shit, he's not an attack dog. He was bad at fighting. His debate against Kamala Harris didn't go well. I don't see Republicans watching that tape. And I'm talking beyond the rank and file, the hoi polloi. I'm even talking like the leadership. I don't think leadership watched his debate against Kamala Harris and was like, this is the guy that we want to save the party in 4 years.
Yeah, the value of Pence is only as great as the need to align yourself with Trump. And when you align yourself with Trump, you need someone like Pence to couple with. But if you're Pence and you know the GOP,
I think he did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
In a post-Trump era, do you need a staunch evangelical to balance shit out, or pretty much reliably go negative partisanship's going to get? Like, look at how Jerry Falwell Jr. has demonstrated to be deeply, deeply fungible. Like a number of these evangelical leaders have proven to be Jeffries, totally craven, Richard Jeffries. There's a number of them that have been completely willing to bend the knee to Trump. Remember the King David narrative, and the King Cyrus narrative, the idea that God works through like flawed men. Once they rolled that shit out, they gave themselves a permission structure where like it could be a Wall Street hedge fund guy, and they could just say like, God's working through him.
Yeah, I just don't recall what happens after this part.
Well, that's because you wouldn't recall it because it's in the future.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you have to foresee. What is in the future, though, maybe not for DC anytime soon, is at least a vote on DC statehood. The House and Senate Democrats have introduced legislation that would make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. Amazing to me that Joe Biden did not use the first week wave to get this right out the gate. And they're worried about a filibuster, and the filibuster threshold. But like, this is another thing where I think Schumer needs to change the rules on this so that they can have a vote on DC statehood.
And when would, if you got that passed, when would that be engaged as far as having a senator, and when does that election take place?
Midterms. Yeah, and so this gives the Democrats a tremendous opportunity to hang on to the Senate as well. And for this reason, this is a thing that Joe Manchin will be fighting tooth and fucking nail. Because it takes away all of his leverage as Mr. 50 vote. If there are more Democrat, yeah. So like, this is a thing that he will be fighting tooth and nail. And the Democrats, I think, just need to bring him to heel on this. And this is where burning the bridge rightward really matters. Because to kind of, to go back to that real quickly, not to live there forever, but the whole point of that is once you burn the rightward bridge for Joe Manchin, he has two options: leave politics or be a good little Democratic soldier and hope that he gets the Democratic money coming in a serious way. And the Democratic help coming in a serious way. And the reason you want to bring him to heel is so that you could do things that are overdue to be done, like DC statehood. Because right now, part of the whole do-si-do with Joe Manchin that has to be done in order to keep this guy in is this immoral stance of denying representation to the people of Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, the people of Delaware, who probably population-wise are very similar, like within 20%, they have full representation in Congress.
So where's the concession here? Is this maybe I'll do D.C. but not Puerto Rico? Well, like, where does the center use Manchin to oppose or not oppose?
We'll do D.C. and Puerto Rico, and in exchange, we'll make sure you keep winning seats in West Virginia,
Right.
and we won't scorch your earth and get you out of politics.
Boy, it sounds
He
like
does not have as good of a hand as the mainstream media like Morning
Right.
Joe's portrayal of Joe Manchin's hand. What I really want to hit home here is it is not as strong as actual reality. It is bound in a large way by a perception of the politics of the possible as defined by like beltway narratives. And if you really think about Joe Manchin's hand, yeah, it's not weak. I'm not sitting here and telling you he's got a weak hand, but I'm also sitting here and telling you it's a beatable hand, and it's not as strong as he makes it out to be. It's a bulldog front.
Is there anyone else on the left who opposes this DC Puerto Rico?
On the left? No. I mean, the Democratic Party, they need these. They need DC and
right.
Puerto Rico. Yeah,
I'm
no, they
just trying
really.
to see who tries to get something out of this other than Manchin.
I mean, Cinema, I think, has a much, and she's thus far been much better about playing her hand.
Right.
But then also Arizona's going the right direction too. Cinema can't sit there and be like, "Oh, I'm so threatened," because I think if she flipped parties, she might have a hard time getting elected as a. She's another person who she goes, "Oh, I've got to play the middle," but if you really think about it, she's really got no credible path to the Republican Party. So does she need to play the middle? I don't know. Anyways, just my thoughts on DC statehood. It would be good if they had a vote on this. And it's yet another reason why filibuster rule needs to be changed. And this is yet another immorality that is allowed to persist because you don't change the filibuster rules.
And when I see budget reconciliation come through for the stimulus, and when I can see talk about $1,400 as something stronger than quote likely, that's when I feel strong that okay, what's the next step? Because other than that, I still feel like I'm being toyed with and I don't understand.
The Democrats are really getting their ass handed to them right now on the stimulus checks thing. The Republicans know what they're doing here, where they're dithering this out, and they might dither this out quite a while, but they're taking all the sting out of the fact that the Democrats won Georgia, ran on, we're going to get $2,000 checks. Again, $4,000 or $1,400 to $2,000, I think, is much less of the issue as it is passing it swiftly thereafter,
right,
to demonstrate to voters that there's a cause and effect thing. That you gave us the votes, we got the thing done. You do what you need to do, we're going to do what we need to do. Right now, there are a lot of people, especially in Georgia, who are like, I fucking did what I fucking needed to do. You fucking go and do your fucking job. And especially if you're on the edge, if rent is coming up this month and it's a pinch point for you, and you're looking at your bank account and you're going, I voted a month and a half ago, and I voted on the $2,000 checks, the fuck are these fuckers doing? Yeah, no, it's very frustrating. The Republicans know exactly what they're doing with this. They got a small victory by dragging this out past the first of the month. And what the Democrats need to absolutely make sure does not happen is that this gets dragged out past the first of the month, this month. Like they need to get this thing passed. I mean, the other thing is, like to your point, I know there are some who listen to the show who do not believe that political capital exists. You're wrong. But the Democrats are pissing away good political capital here.
So if we are to look at the Schumer and Pelosi with our powers combined, this is what the output is. How long did the ACA take to legislate?
Oh, that's a terrible example. That took like
that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's a terrible example. Okay, that's a terrible example though. One, obviously, because of the results. Yes. However, I'll go a little bit further in their defense and say it's a terrible example because it's like a big, fundamentally revamping a system for decades to come thing. Whereas this is more like an acute. It's a big package, but it's a targeted, discrete response thing. And I will say this. The ACA, meet with people and kind of conceive what the system's going to look like and all that shit. In the case of the coronavirus stimulus package, they had a template for this in the House bill that got passed in 2020 that they really could have just picked up and voted on right away once they got the vote seated. But once you get your senators seated on the 20th, and, again, give them some credit here. It's only been like 17 days or whatever since they got the senators seated. But still, the first of the month went by, which is important. And that perceptual threshold went by. 78% of Americans support the stimulus checks. Great number. But the other thing of that is every day that Biden takes longer on this, it hurts Biden because people so overwhelmingly support this. 90% of Democrats support this. 64% of Republicans support this. So centrist Joe, if he wants to not be a patrician centrist, might want to get his brain around getting this thing passed quickly. And I think when he says shit like, we're going to means test it, we might not, it'll only be for some, it's stupid. It's stupid. They just get the money out the fucking door. And if you're really worried about means testing in the back end, you can do that through the tax code. You can actually tax it and get that money back on the back end. Taxes are coming up in April. I mean, Brian, we're talking about the shortest of short-term loans here. If you really want to, do it. It's silly. 47% of Americans believe that the Senate should vote to convict convict Trump on his impeachment. This is similar to the last time around, where over half supported him being convicted and removed from office. 50% say that Trump bears a great deal or quite a bit of responsibility for the events on the Capitol on January 6th. This largely divides down partisan lines, as you might expect, but there's a non-negligible amount of Republicans who also believe this. And that section of the Republican Party would love to be put out of their misery when it comes to Donald Trump. But it does not look like that's going to happen. It doesn't look like there's enough of them in Congress. Any thoughts on the Trump impeachment trial coming up this week?
I guess whenever something like this comes up, see now Trump isn't using the impeachment trial to cover up what Trump himself is otherwise doing. I'm wondering if there is anything that Biden's administration is going to use the impeachment trial to push through that they're glad the impeachment trial is around to distract from. I guess that's where my brain always goes to.
I mean, like what the impeachment trial really does serve singularly as a distraction opportunity. The outcome being a foregone conclusion. I think you're right. And I think it's not unreasonable to even look a little eyes askance at the Democrats beseeching Trump to go and testify on Capitol Hill. Like, I mean, there's a number of reasons why, like, you might argue on a security reason, it's kind of a dubious move to do right now. And on security alone. And thusly, it makes me wonder, mayhaps something else is happening. that they would like to distract from. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like, when I talk about Lloyd Austin. I'm suspicious as fuck that 95 or 93 senators voted for this guy when you can't get 93 votes for fucking anything. Even the sky is blue at this point. But I also don't know what he's doing. And then there's some reports that, like Austin wants to go through and root out racism and extremism in the Defense Department that looks, at least at top level, to be very promising. So, it does. It's just one of those things that, like, it raises my eyebrow. But sometimes my eyebrow gets raised and then my eyebrow goes back down. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, like for
I'm
instance,
old enough to not say everything's a fucking conspiracy.
Yeah. The Trump impeachment is the perfect time to do some foreign policy stuff that doesn't seem like a Democratic branding friendly thing to do, but it's something that when you have Lloyd Austin, it's something that's it's kind of predictable. It's almost like these are the moments where, like, okay, whatever you want to do, let's just press pause until we have this Trump moment, and then we can hit the play button again. And I don't know. That's about as cynical as I get on it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, let's kick it over to world news here. I was gonna do this thing on censuring. I did think it was interesting that the first person who was not allowed to be seated in Congress, or like the last time that the censure, let me set this up again. The last time censure was invoked was done on a representative in 1919, so about 100 years ago. They were a socialist, Victor Berger, and he was not allowed to be seated on the basis that he actively opposed U.S. participation in World War I, and he was prosecuted and convicted under the Espionage Act. Which I've talked about. Dude, the Espionage Act is fucked up. Dude.
Yeah.
There's a great book about the Espionage Act in this time period 100 years ago called Unsafe for Democracy that anyone who is interested in that subject or has heard, like, the Glenn Greenwalds of the world or whatever bring up the Espionage Act during the Obama years. Guys, go and check out Unsafe for Democracy. It's fantastic. Talks about surveilling Methodist churches because they're, largely German. And so they'd be worried that pacifism would be coming up in Methodist churches. Victor Berger here, prosecuted for being a conscientious objector. I mentioned conscientious objection in the last episode. One of the reasons I feel so strongly about conscientious objection is you do not have to go that far back to see how conscientious objectors get treated like absolute shit and how it's actually important that we have legal protections for people who have conscientious objections for a wide number or a wide range of different things. So anyways, Victor Berger here, not Vic Berger, who makes all the cool videos that we sometimes watch. Victor Berger refused or opposed participation in World War I, convicted under the Espionage Act. House of Representatives refers his case to a special committee for investigation, concluded that he was ineligible for membership and refused to seat him. So, if you want to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of these other members of Congress who supported Stop the Steal, a thing that, and I'll give the House members some credit for, they impeached him over insurrection, which I think is clever here, because that opens up a very credible argument that all these other members, including Josh fucking Hawley, should not be seated. If you're not going to seat the socialist, and this, I guess, I again want to kind of hit home why I'd love to see the left get more dogged about process arguments and stuff like that. Because a lot of times they're in your favor, and it would increase your political foothold and your credibility and your ability to reach out and get to the, let's say, the process Democrats and the Lincoln Project Democrats who are like, don't seat the seditionists. The socialists should be making this argument stronger than anyone because they've been the victims of this injustice. And it absolutely can and would and has been used against them. So they absolutely can and would and should be using it against their political opponents who, if you don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene's your political opponent, you're fucking crazy. She's absolutely your political opponent. Ted Cruz is absolutely your political opponent. And you would be rewarded within the caucus for forcibly going after Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I would love to see the socialists be some of the strongest voices for using this sedition and insurrection clause against members of the House. And it behooves the Democrats to do this because from the socialists all the way over to like the Pelosi caucus, all the way over to like Seth Moulton, the guys who are like, like kind of almost like blue dog Democrats. It behooves all of them to hang on to the House. And a great way to hang on to the House is this cynical, Chris? It sounds cynical, Chris. Yeah, it's cynical. Great way to hang on to the House is kick out members from the other side. And you've got an absolutely perfectly good reason to do it.
Yeah, I wonder, just as far as these schisms go, whenever you create a schism with the GOP, the GOP maybe isn't as aligned as you otherwise understand it to be. Does that give the left more of an opportunity to consider a schism without hamstringing some of the things that they have promised they were in alignment with? Like for instance, with the Justice Democrats, if you have enough of the Marjorie Greene folks getting away from the GOP, the Justice Democrats can then push in the other direction on enough things, but still say, like, look, we're voting with the Democrats when we need to. I don't know if this is cross pressure or I feel like we haven't got too far away from AOC having kind of like an sort of like an offensive with Pelosi.
This is an amazing opportunity for AOC. Yeah, I'd actually bring this up. I think AOC can do one of two things here. One, she can leverage this to try to pressure out the representatives. But two, and it really does behoove her because she's one who's routinely labeled as socialist. Ilhan Omar, who they wanted to censure, Ilhan Omar might want to step up to bat on this one because it's not as though like she's not still very much a target in all of this. I want to avoid saying things like political crosshairs and stuff, especially in this time period. But yeah, like I mean, they tried to censure. You remember? Oh, this is funny. So at one point this week, I had like the news feed on my TV, right, and on YouTube. And when like a YouTube video times out, it'll just like throw recommendations at you. In my case, when I do the news, I get throwbacks to articles from like the last decade, which is fascinating. And one of the throwbacks I got this week was to when Ilhan Omar got censured over the stuff like hypnotized the world and like the kind of borderline anti-Semitic remarks that she made. This back 2 years ago. You don't remember this? Yeah. It wasn't that long ago. So like, there was already talk this week of going after Ilhan Omar again on this stuff. And I think people like Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the squad, really, the people who are most likely to be labeled socialist, need to be taking some of the history and the precedent and saying, no, we're actually operating very much within the structure. We're operating very much within precedent, and take the precedent and use it as a tool, not only as a tool, but as a weapon. Figured I'd pop you on that one.
Now it's a show.
Yeah, now we're on here, bringing it home, bringing it back to our roots. No, but I really do think this is a really great opportunity for them on that front, and they should do it. Hanging on to the House behooves everyone. It makes it doing everything you can to do that, both right and wrong. And when the light's on your side, use the light. Don't go like, well, that would be mean. These people tried to fucking kill you. It would be really mean to try to fucking kill somebody. And is it mean to punish someone? I suppose. Do you punish people who deserve it? I suppose you ought to. That's my only thought there.
Yeah, I think there should be some sort of angle that the Justice Democrats, or I don't know if they still align themselves under that
Oh, they do.
caucus.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's still
Yeah.
a Justice Democrats caucus.
You could say, for instance, look, Pelosi, we're aligning ourselves. You're asking for 95% solidarity with the vote. We're going to give you 90 based on now aligning ourselves with 90% of the things that are so centrist in nature that they have to get through Manchin. There should be some sort of open conversation there. If the Justice Caucus is really trying to flex their muscle in wherever they can incrementally go, ask for 90% instead of 95. Like agree to different terms, or at least push back on the terms that you're given. If they want you to agree to a 95% solidarity on the House, at least say, like, openly, like, look, we don't believe in making an agreement with anything greater than 90%, and make them in the media like push back on you from there, or else I don't know. I always feel like the left is squandering their opportunities here.
Yeah, I do feel like there are opportunities missed. I also keep going, like, dude, we're like 2.5 weeks into this administration, and
this is
well,
when
yeah,
these agreements are made.
yeah, no, it's a balance. It's a very fine balance again, because, like, no, what the centrists and, like, what kind of Beltway narrative is, like, oh, don't worry about that, we'll get that in like 6 months. But, like, it's amazing how many doors close within 6 months. And Trump had that exact same experience. Obama had that experience. I've lived and documented and talked about politicians going through that experience. I've seen it. And that's when I'm talking about political capital. I'm talking about that perceptual doorway of halls, or a doorway or hallway of doors. Doorway of halls. Hallway of doors.
You got there.
I was going to call this episode Patrician Centrism, but Doorway of halls. Yeah, it's getting deep, man. Anyways, like, you have all these doors, and they close. You walk down the hall, and like, then you get further down that hall in the first term, and there are doors still, but they are more spaced out. And like, that's the way the rest of the further you go down the hallway, yeah, there's still doors, but they are more distant. There are a lot more doors in this first few months.
Some of them are traps.
Some of them lead to more halls, but dumb halls.
Dumb halls.
Yeah, dumb halls. Yeah. To segue geniusly off of that, I'm gonna move us now into world news. Brian, this is a God. World news.
Keep going. Just
world
go.
news is really dark too. I guess I'll transition us in. News here on Sunday, out of India, is that a giant glacier broke off. I cannot pronounce these geographical locations, but has resulted in the death of 150 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sign of the times. I saw that. I just was thinking, global warming. I mean, these are glaciers in mountain regions that have not broken off in decades and decades. Yeah. So just sad, major tragedy, and anyways, just want to mention that.
Well, yeah, I don't know how many of these tragedies are going to take place. Like, for instance, I think the closest thing we have regarding to climate change is the landslides that are on the West Coast. I guess anything around the Ring of Fire.
Yeah, I was just saying the forest fires. Effect. Yeah, the forest fires.
But the forest fires are sort of seasonal. But I think
and then also Alaska, the melting ice fields in Alaska, and like there's a clear recession of historic, like, permafrost areas. Yeah.
Well, there's going to be these places worldwide where there used to be a cultural kind of cost-benefit analysis on, okay, it's still worthwhile to live there. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of the timelines of
The climate refugee crisis.
Yeah. It's like, okay, that's it. I'm no longer living in Houston. I'm no longer rebuilding my house for the third time after another hurricane.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to our college years, they did the evacuation in New Orleans, and I remember sort of at the time, kind of the discussion being like, okay, like, but you're gonna go back? You sure? Yeah, because you're under sea level, and like, don't get me wrong, like New Orleans is one of my favorite, like literally one of my favorite cities in the country. Probably one of the first places I will go when the pandemic lifts and I'm vaccinated and I can go on vacation again. I'll probably go to New Orleans for a week. Like no joke. I will, because I love the food there. I don't even like drink or party like that, but I love the music. I love the food, and it's cheap. It's a cheap vacation. But it's also like, geographically speaking, not a tenable place to live probably in the next 100 years.
No, the viability of the gateway of the Mississippi, that is no longer the job creator.
Yeah, I know. It's not even a job creator thing. I'm talking about like they're already under sea level. They keep building.
Right.
Like you can build massive levees and they could dump a ton of money into the levees. I'm sure on that. But they won't. And even if you did, you can't change the fact that the ocean's rising. Like there's no answer for the sea level rising. That's the unpleasant part of all of this. Is like the sea level is just going to keep rising. We don't have a way of fixing the climate. Like short of a scientific breakthrough that would allow for like a frosting of the planet or something weird. Which we're not going to do because it would make like 7 billion people are not going to, go for, hey, we're going to launch a satellite into space and it might kill us all, but it might also save us from global warming. No, we're not going to do that. All right. So now what I want to finish off on Myanmar. In Myanmar this week, they had a coup. I don't know. Did you follow any of this?
I followed a little bit more than just the aerobics video, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. The aerobics video is amazing, though, right?
I know the aerobics video plus this much. Okay, so man, that visual is totally it's spooky and it's totally meme friendly all at once.
So to give you all some setup here, for more than half a century, beginning in 1962. Myanmar was ruled under military dictatorship. It wasn't actually until 2010 when Aung San Suu Kyi and her party won elections that Myanmar began to have a democracy. A lot of us grew up knowing Myanmar as Burma. One of my favorite groups growing up is Mission of Burma. I've seen them live. They're an incredible band. They probably would not have as much zing if they were Mission of Myanmar. But it's a bit of a mouthful. Eminem, M-O-M, Mom. I love Mom. Anyways, point being, Myanmar becomes a democracy in 2010. Aung San Suu Kyi gets awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. Things feel good. And this is deep into the 2010 era of good feeling around the idea that Facebook is going to spread democracy, that democracy is in an upswing, that we're having the Arab Spring, which is in a rising of democracy across the world, that Egypt was moving towards a democratic society. They, of course, have now ended up back under Generalissimo Sisi. He's not a general anymore. Okay, sure. But I mean, come on. Even like Gaddafi and stuff, there's like a real hope. I'm old enough to remember, I'll make this joke until I'm blue in the face. I'm old enough to remember when Facebook was viewed as a tool for spreading democracy across the planet. And in places like Myanmar, etc., they were kind of holding the line on keeping a free and open internet. Where things start to go off the rails, when they agreed to China that they would restrict some services. When they started to make curtailings for fascist regimes, Facebook really started to, show what they actually were and become what they were. Anyways, the military was no longer ruling the country after 2010, but not unlike in Egypt, the military doesn't just fuck off, especially not after they've had a military dictatorship. Militaries, once they tend to get a taste of dictatorial power, like to hang on to it. In Egypt, they threw off the Muslim Brotherhood pretty quickly because they were like, Muslims bad. And everyone was like, Muslims bad. And like there was no global support for the Muslim Brotherhood, no global support for Mohammed Morsi. I'm not saying he was a great guy or anything. I'm just saying these are the truths. And thus, the Generalissimo, Sisi, was able to step back in and go, oh, no more Mubarak, but I will step in and, bring you back Mubarak, essentially. It's Mubarak without the Mubarak. Well, the military never fully went away in Myanmar either. And they launched an ethnic cleansing operation of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. And Aung San Suu Kyi, because yes, she was nominally in control of the democracy, but it was a tentative one, more or less had to toe the line behind this purge of the Rohingya Muslim. And we heard about this at length during 2019. Actually, the copy I found here is during 2019. But also, meanwhile, while this purge of Muslims is happening, this is being done and overseen by a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Aung San Suu Kyi wins the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during all of this, up until now, the international community did little other than condemn the violence. And this has been since 2017 when an ethnic cleansing operation in the western state of Rakhine, which led to an exodus of the Rohingya minority, had occurred. So they've been going on for 3 years. It had been well documented. I can put up tons of links on this stuff. And the military also has had, in their transition document to democracy, I'm a little sloppy here, but I'm doing a little of this off the top of memory here. What the military were able to broker for themselves is an ability to declare emergency and take martial law at any time. So it's like you can have a democracy unless we decide that you guys are in such an emergency that we have to come in and save y'all from yourselves. Yeah. Yeah. A little bit more here. Following a colonial legacy, the Myanmar Constitution of 2008 has an official classification system of 135 national races based on the assumptions of who the original inhabitants of the territory were before colonial rule. It created national status, which allowed the mostly Muslim Rohingya minority to be disenfranchised and ultimately expelled because they are considered to be a stateless community. Most of them live in neighboring refugee camps in Bangladesh.
So at some point, do you have to backtrack and look at how this agreement was sold to the public?
Yeah,
I mean,
look, especially, you can. I'm looking here. I've got a clip of Pence and Aung San Suu Kyi in 2018. You can find Aung San Suu Kyi and Obama. Liberals liked it because they liked the idea of a strong female leader in a democratic country.
So technically, this wasn't
Republicans liked it, and then Republicans liked it because they had a fig leaf to wage the war on terror, which is really just a way of going after a Muslim minority population.
Right.
I think Republicans probably saw this relationship fairly clearly. And it is a coup in the sense that Aung San Suu Kyi has now been displaced and the military is in control. But
I guess so,
it was also, I guess to
parameters...
your point, it was never fully a democracy.
Right. You have to have a certain hinge in place in order for the coup to be possible. But if there's always that asterisk there, like, it was never yours to begin with.
I agree. I mean, like, look, is this a great democracy? Is a democracy great that has something like this happen? Even after the UN and other international fact-finding bodies showed that ethnic cleansings and even genocide might have been occurring in 2017, Aung San Suu Kyi went to the International Court of Justice at The Hague and defended the army. And the army is the one who made her do that. So yeah, you got a Buddhist versus Muslim relationship here, and like that's also murky. Buddhists have generally been pretty good at branding themselves as nonviolent, even when that's not necessarily the case sometimes. Like you can have very, very violent Buddhists. They're people just like anyone else. Yeah, and yeah, no, it's not a great democracy, and the military's always had a very strong hold on it. The alternative, though, I think Aung San Suu Kyi looked at this, is Egypt. You get in, you try to fight up against the military, which is what Morsi did, and then the military just comes and kicks your ass out. I think Aung San Suu Kyi and a lot of, there are a lot of people who probably think, you take what you can get. Democracy is a growth process, and like this is not a perfect relationship, but we can keep pushing back against the military over time. I would probably be in that camp if I was over there. But there's also problems. I mean, and I definitely in 2017 with Morsi getting the boot, in 2013 in Egypt ending up a dictatorship again, after less than 2 years of a failed democracy. Yeah, I'd be worried about if I was in Myanmar. Yeah, sure. I get it. I get it. But I mean, at a certain point, yeah, the military also will try to run roughshod on you. Like the Egyptians zigged and ended up in a ditch. The people of Myanmar, I don't know what the Myanmarese, they zagged and they ended up in a ditch in a different way.
Yeah.
But this just shows, kind of getting back to what Matt Lewis and I were talking about in the last episode, these are two really great examples of how fragile democracy can be. And a thing that is kind of scary is that some of these cues were taken off of what was happening here domestically. It appears that the Myanmar military saw what the U.S. was considering, Trump's administration was considering, in terms of hanging on to power, and kind of like the whole stop the steal thing. Because their whole, disposing Aung San Suu Kyi is based around false claims that like the election was errantly decided or something. That like it was a rigged election. It's not. Like she definitely clearly won. But they took those cues. And worth remembering that Mike Flynn was actually talking about using martial law to keep Trump in office. And was discussing with Trump. And Trump was impressed with this. This is back in December. This is like 6 weeks ago.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I'm going to keep saying it because it's like forces in the media want to move past the thing that happened on 1/6. And the more I feel that energy, the more I want to push back against it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to revisit without in the right context, but also not lose your audience.
Yeah, well, we're not going back for the umpteenth time today. We're finishing off on this. The stuff involving the Uyghur Muslims in China appears to be on a bit of a collision course with the Olympics. And we may see a scenario where the Olympics do not occur in Beijing. Beijing is set to have the 2022 Olympic Games. However, the reporting coming out of East Xinjiang, which we've talked about for a number of years here, and I was talking about this several years ago because it got on my radar early. This Muslim minority population in East Xinjiang, known as the Uighurs, has been persecuted violently in an attempt to Hanify the East Xinjiang province, Han being the dominant, the equivalent of white here in America, if you will, essentially to purify East Xinjiang of its religious, because Chinese government is secular, does not like religion in any way. This religious minority, this Muslim minority that does not believe the same things that the Chinese people do, so say the Chinese government. And we've gotten reports out of the awfulness of the Uyghur camps, people disappearing, millions of people disappearing, people being forced to change their language, people not being allowed to pray, practice the religion that they believe. And we've talked about in the past the program that the Chinese government does. I say it's like one family, one country, where a Han Chinese person comes and lives with a Uyghur family, often a man. Yeah. And and it's encouraged to have coital relations Yeah, no, like what's happening in East Xinjiang is I don't often invoke like World War II era Germany. But it's as though the Chinese government took lessons and cues off of the Nazi Party's ethnic cleansing program. And we're like, how can we do this in a more subtle way, but get to the exact same goal ultimately, at the exact same scale? How can we update the Nazi playbook? I don't say that lightly. I say that actually with some consideration, but they're raping the women in here. I'm going to read some stuff. If this is not what y'all want to hear right now, I understand. Real quickly, if you need to end the show, really, patreon.com/DWATG. Please, go and support the show. Follow me at DWATG. Really, if you don't want to hear about this, I understand. The reporting is coming out here from Fox News, BBC News, and also a group that I found that I like called the Uyghur Human Rights Project. That does a nice job tracking all of this stuff. But I'm going to just read various passages that I saw. The men always wore masks, said Tursunai Ziadun, or Ziawudun. I'm sorry about the name. Even though there was no pandemic then. They wore suits, she said, not police uniforms. Sometimes after midnight, they would come to the cells and select women they wanted to take and take them down a corridor to a, quote, black room where there were no surveillance cameras. Several nights, this person said, they took her. Perhaps this is the most unforgettable scar on me forever. I don't even want these words to spill from my mouth. First, they stripped off my clothing. Then they tore out my earrings so that my ears were bleeding, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt worse for one elderly woman, like a grandmother. They stripped everything off her, and she kept falling on the ground, and they kept pushing her and pulling her up, and she just kept falling down. How could you do that to a mother? Any woman under 40 was raped. Everyone in the camp experienced this. And of course, I did too. I was also beaten. I was kicked and stamped on. Once so much on my private parts that I was bleeding, and I have since had to have my ovaries removed. This is what the Chinese government's doing. And they know what they're doing. And like, sometimes I will hear there are two talking points that will piss me the fuck off these days. I mean, it's not like people hit me with them a lot or anything. It's not like the listeners, but I'll see it sometimes. It'll be like, well, the U.S. has more prisons than China per capita. It's like, okay, yeah, well, the Chinese have a tendency of just killing people who break Chinese law or disappearing your ass. And so, like, yeah, you have to incarcerate someone who's dead. And then the second part is like, the Chinese don't count these re-education camps as part of their penal system. So the Chinese have all these prison camps that are technically not prisons. At least in America, yeah, we got too many people in prison, but we mostly, overwhelmingly label the prisons as prisons. And that does make a difference. It really does. And then the second part is when people try to tell me, including people I care about, that what's happening in China is not a genocide. I'm sorry, and I say this to some of y'all with love if you're listening. It's a fucking genocide, and like, you gotta stop. I don't know where you're getting this shit from, but you gotta stop. You gotta stop. Like, we need to see this real steely-eyed for what this is. And I think if you're someone who cares about human rights, like over here we have Black Lives Matter. The idea of lives mattering. I'm not saying all lives matter like that. I'm literally saying, like, it's about human rights. And these are people that we don't have to know to know that they deserve better than this. People that we never have to meet this woman to know that she absolutely 100% did not deserve to have her private parts stamped on until her ovaries had to be removed surgically. And like, I really do hope, one, that the Biden administration takes a much more muscular position on this. I have another conservative friend who's like, oh, the Biden administration is going to be squishy on China. I was like, squishier than the Trump administration that was okay with the genocide. Because they want to talk about how Trump was tough on China. I am sorry. He was a fucking wimp. He had no balls. He has no ability to stand up on this absolute thing that has complete moral clarity. He wanted to fight about patents. Oh, he was so tough. No, I hope Biden is tougher than Trump. I hope Biden is tough. Because like we should not be standing up alone. But we should definitely be rallying a global coalition to go after China on this. And oh, by the way, sanction the fuck out of them. Which, yeah, will it start a trade war? Yeah, I'm fine with starting a trade war to stop a genocide. I'll be able to sleep at night absolutely fine if our economy takes a dip, manufacturing goes down a little bit, because we stop a genocide of the Uyghur Muslims. And I think it's very possible, if we want to talk about the politics of this, to sell this to the Republicans too, as like, we're gonna do the trade war, we're on the side of the light, we're standing up against the Muslims. China is bad, a narrative they seem to really like. And yeah, no, I think we ought to, because yeah, the Chinese government, the CCP, are overseeing a fucking genocide in their country, and they know what they're doing, and they're happy to do it, and they don't want to stop. It doesn't matter if Fox News, the BBC, the Nation, those are all three articles. All three of these quotes came from that, and the CBC, very different sources. Everyone in the world's reporting it. Chinese know what's up. They know that we know. They just don't think we have the balls to do anything about it. And I think we should prove them wrong.
Yeah, I hope we do. I'm really curious where this travels and how much steam the Biden administration allows this to get. And I've honestly heard people on the right speak about this more than people on the left, it seems.
Yeah, there's some of the loudest voices for denialism of what is happening in East Xinjiang come from the left. And it's I've been pulling punches on it, honestly, but I've been seeing it for several years now, and it has made me very uncomfortable, because like, this is a fucking genocide. I don't understand where the lack of moral clarity is coming from. I hope that it's coming from out of the country, because that would make a lot. I worry whenever I see it get picked up by people who are in the country. Yeah. So that's unless you got something else, that's it. That's your news of the week.
No, I have no news of the week. I have no extra news of the week. No.
I got to see. All right, so we're ending the show. I got to see some dinosaur eggs yesterday. I reconnected with some old friends. They run a business doing all sorts of minerals like amethyst and quartz and all that sort of stuff, but they also have fossils as well. And one of the things that they have are 75 million year old dinosaur eggs, like a hatch, like an actual, like, or a clutch of eggs, I think is what it's called.
Maybe that, yeah.
Yeah, a clutch of clutch of eggs. But like they were remarkably well preserved. Oh, so cool, dude. Like, just see it going like, holy shit. 75 million years ago, that was alive. Like, super humbling and super awe-inspiring. Anyways, I just thinking about that. Humility always a good thing. I like to end on humility, and I'm thankful and humbled that this show is halfway on its way to this march to 1,000 episodes. And it's because of listeners like y'all supporting the show over at patreon.com/DWATG, where you can get the video version of this podcast, and like the fuller, more straight up audio of it too, as well as bonus episodes and that sort of thing. Make sure if you sign up there, if you're interested in getting help, getting started on investment, get at me, message me on that front. That's included as part of Patreon membership. Also, make sure you, oh God, what else? I don't know. There's other Patreon stuff. I'm blanking now. I'm ruining the plugs. Brian, where can people find you on the internet? Maybe it'll come back to me.
They can find me at Postman Retweets or at Postman RTs. One thing I am kind of focusing on right now is a study in German politics. It's called the Fundy Relo controversy. And there's a few different studies here just looking at the issue of minority parties potentially working inside or not within
coalitional parliamentary governments.
Right. And there was a moment in German politics where this subject really came to the forefront. And it seems as though whenever you want to look at scholarly articles about minority politics, you really have to get outside of America to look at people who are really talking about
We
this
don't
more
have really good
completely.
case studies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a boring
Yeah.
place to do case studies in because we don't have them. So yeah, that's it. I feel like there's other stuff, but you know, if you've got ideas for shows, guests you'd like me to book on the show, please let me know. Please leave reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. Tell a friend. Oh, one last thing. If there are, because of like Patreon and all the extra functions, there are a lot of different little buttons and stuff that I have to click whenever I post an episode, and I do occasionally miss one. I caught this week that episode 504 and 502 didn't post to the iTunes streams and the Stitcher streams because I didn't click podcast on the Don't Worry. So if something like that happens, please message me. Let me know. You're not bothering me. I appreciate it because I'm like one dude and there's not like a staff. And if I don't, if I don't know, then I don't know. And no one's going to tell me because Brian's a bad friend. Anyways, I want to thank you all so much for listening to the show. And thanks, Brian, for coming on the show. And until the next one, bye-bye.